What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is February 24th, 2026, about 8:15 p.m. where I'm at right now. And we are continuing our 20th book in our Book to React series. This is episode 2 of Invisible Man, the classic novel by Ralph Ellison. And this is our second piece of fiction that we're doing on our channel. And this is another book that I'm reading for one of the classes that I'm taking while studying in university, while being here in Budapest, Hungary. I'm taking every semester at least 1 or 2 classes on blackness, race, African-American history, and in this case, African-American literature. And so, we're reading Invisible Man. I got to do a presentation on Invisible Man. I read this book before when I was a teenager. Loved this book to no end, and I can't wait to share it with the people. We read the prologue yesterday, and my mind was blown again, like I was 17 years old again in my bedroom, turning the pages to this endlessly, and hopefully you felt the same when we read the prologue. But if not, maybe you'll get into it when we read chapter 1 today. So we're only going to read 1 chapter of Invisible Man and call it a day. Hopefully you enjoy it. I'll be reading the comments as they come in, whether in the vertical live stream or the horizontal one. Let me know how you're feeling and we'll get to it. Let's get into it today. Chapter 1 of Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. It goes a long way back, some 20 years. All my life, I had been looking for something, and everywhere I turned, someone tried to tell me what it was. I accepted their answers too, though they were often in contradiction and even self-contradictory. I was naive. I was looking for myself and asking everyone except myself questions which I, and only I, could answer. It took me a long time and much painful boomeranging of my expectations to achieve a realization everyone else appears to have been born with, that I am nobody but myself. But first I had to discover that I am an invisible man. I love every single sentence of that. And yet I am no freak of nature, nor of history. I was in the cards. Other things have been equal or unequal 85 years ago. I am not ashamed of my grandparents for having been slaves. I am only ashamed of myself for having at one time been ashamed. About 85 years ago, they were told that they were free, united with others of our country in everything pertaining to the common good, and in everything social, separate. But my grandfather is the one. He was an odd old guy. My grandfather, and I am told I take after him. It was he who caused the trouble. On his deathbed, he called my father to him and said, "Son, after I'm gone, I want you to keep up the good fight. I never told you, but our life is a war, and I have been a traitor all my born days, a spy in the enemy's country, ever since I give up my gun back in the Reconstruction. Live with your head in the lion's mouth. I want you to overcome them with yeses, undermine them with grins, agree them to death and destruction. Let them swallow you till they vomit or bust wide open." They thought the old man had gone out of his mind. He had been the meekest of men. The younger children were rushed from the room, the shades drawn, and the flames of the lamp turned so low that it sputtered on the wick like the old man's breathing. "Learn it to the youngins," he whispered fiercely. Then he died. Powerful, powerful. So basically, grandfather's saying, like, listen, don't be like me. Don't step and fetch it. Be a warrior. Be a revolutionary. Anyway, continuing here in Invisible Man. But my folks were more alarmed over his last words than over his dying. It was as though he had not died at all. His words caused so much anxiety. I was warned emphatically to forget what he had said, and indeed, this is the first time it has been mentioned outside the family circle. It had a tremendous effect upon me. However, I could never be sure of what he meant. Grandfather had been a quiet old man who never made any trouble. Yet on his deathbed, he had called himself a traitor and a spy, and he had spoken of his meekness as a dangerous activity. It became a constant puzzle which lay unanswered in the back of my mind. And whenever things went well for me, I remembered my grandfather and felt guilty and uncomfortable. It was as though I was carrying out his advice in spite of myself. And to make it worse, everyone Everyone loved me for it. I was praised by the most lily-white men of the town. I was considered an example of desirable conduct, just as my grandfather had been. And what puzzled me was that the old man had defined it as treachery. When I was praised for my conduct, I felt a guilt that in some way I was doing something that was really against the wishes of the white folks, that if they had understood, they would have desired me to act just the opposite, that I should have been sulky and mean, and that really would have been what they wanted, even though they were fooled and thought they wanted me to act as I did. It made me afraid that someday they would look upon me as a traitor and I would be lost. Still, I was more afraid to act any other way because they didn't like that at all. The old man's words were like a curse. On my graduation day, I delivered an oration in which I showed that humility was the secret, indeed the very essence of progress. Not that I believed this. How could I, remembering my grandfather? I only believed that it worked. It was a great success. Everyone praised me, and I was invited to give the speech at a gathering of the town's leading white citizens. It was a triumph for our whole community. Okay, so maybe I got that part wrong. I maybe misinterpreted that line. When the grandfather died, he told the main narrator's father, hey, say yes, sir, no, sir, and live like a spy, like I did, because this is dangerous activity you're doing when you're black and you're able to enter white spaces and overhear what the white folks are saying. And so now the narrator is saying, like, I didn't want to do this, but I sort of felt like I had to do it as in honor of my grandfather and my lineage, but also as a part of the danger. Okay? So, yeah. So, I'm going to go here, continuing here. Shout out to Conservative Denker up in the chat. Shout out to Conservative Denker for showing love to this radical content up in here. Let's continue in this reading of Richard Ellison's Invisible Man. It was in the main ballroom of the leading hotel. When I got there, I discovered that it was on the occasion of a smoker, and I was told that since I was to be there anyway, I might as well take part in the battle royal to be fought by some of my schoolmates as part of the entertainment. The battle royal came first. All of the town's big shots were there in their tuxedos, wolfing down the buffet foods, drinking beer and whiskey, and smoking black cigars. It was a large room with a high ceiling. Chairs were arranged in a neat row around three sides of a portable boxing ring. The fourth side was clear, revealing a gleaming space of polished floor. I had some misgivings over the battle royale, by the way, not for a distaste for fighting, but because I didn't care too much for the other fellows who were to take part. They were tough guys who seemed to have no grandfather's curse worrying their minds. No one could mistake their toughness. And besides, I suspected that fighting a battle royal might detract from the dignity of my speech. In those pre-invisible days, I visualized myself as a potential Booker T. Washington. But the other fellows didn't care too much for me either, and there were 9 of them. I felt superior to them in my way, and I didn't like the manner in which we were all crowded together in the servants' elevator, nor did they like my being there. In fact, as the warmly lighted floors flashed past the elevator, we had words over the fact that I, by taking part in the fight, had knocked one of their friends out of a night's work. We were led to the elevator through a rococo hall into an anteroom and told to get into our fighting togs. Each of us was issued a pair of boxing gloves and ushered out into the big mirrored hall, which we entered looking cautiously about us and whispering, lest we might accidentally be heard above the noise of the room. It was foggy with cigar smoke, and already the whiskey was taking effect. I was shocked to see some of the most important men of the town quite tipsy. They were all there. Bankers, lawyers, judges, doctors, fire chiefs, teachers, merchants, even one of the more fashionable pastors. Something we could not see was going on up front. A clarinet was vibrating sensuously, and the men were standing up and moving eagerly forward. We were a small, tight-knit group, clustered together, our bare upper bodies touching and shining with anticipatory sweat, while up front the big shots were becoming increasingly excited over something we still could not see. Suddenly I heard the school superintendent, who had told me to come, yell, "Bring up the shines, gentlemen, bring up the little shines." And shine was an old racist term for black people back then. I wonder when Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, and all the other rich white men of America, when they get together for their secret Illuminati meetings, do you think they still do Mandingo fights? Do you still think they bring up young black men to fight each other to the death for the white man's entertainment? I don't know. Maybe they might have, because in Invisible Man, in this scene he's describing, this is an eyes wide shut party. You would think that the white men in this small town, the rich white men, are about to have sex with a bunch of children right now, because that's what it all sounds like, and it sounds very familiar to our president, Mr. Donald Trump, and his activities with Jeffrey Epstein. But I wonder if the Epstein parties also included Mandingo fights. What do you think? Continuing here. So we were rushed up to the front of the ballroom, where it smelled even more strongly of tobacco and whiskey. Then we were pushed into place. I almost wet my pants. A sea of faces, some hostile, some amused, ringed around us. And in the center, facing us, stood a magnificent blonde, stark naked. Okay, yep, this is an Epstein party. Epstein party. Naked white woman alert. There was a dead silence. I felt a blast of cold air chill me. I tried to back away, but they were behind me and around me. Some of the boys stood with lowered heads, trembling. I felt a wave of irrational guilt and fear. My teeth chattered. My skin turned to goose flesh. My knees knocked. Yet I was strongly attracted and looked in spite of myself. Had the price of looking been blindness, I would have looked. The hair was yellow like that of a circus Cupid doll. The face heavily powdered and roughed, as though to form an abstract mass. The eyes hollow and smeared a cool blue, the color of a baboon's butt. I felt a desire to spit upon her as my eyes brushed slowly over her body. Her breasts were firm and round as the domes of East Indian temples, and I stood so close as to see the fine skin texture and beads of pearly perspiration glistening like dew around the pink and erected buds of her nipples. I wanted at one and the same time to run from the room, to sink through the floor, or go to her and cover her from my eyes and the eyes of the others with my body, to feel the soft thighs, to caress her and destroy her, to love her and murder her, to hide from her, and yet to stroke where below the small American flag tattooed upon her belly, her thighs formed a capital V. I had a notion that all in the room she saw only me with her impersonal eyes. You know what I like about this book is that it just goes there. You know, in the Jungle Fever, they don't hide anything when discussing interracial relationships and the taboos around them. In the very first part of this book, in the prologue, he beats a white man within the first paragraph. In the first chapter of this book, he is, front and center with a naked white woman at a time when brothers were getting lynched for that. And he's just like admitting all the emotions and thoughts in his mind that a person who lived during that time would ever think. If a black man was even, looking at a white woman at that time, you could be murdered. And here he is in the boxing rink with a naked white woman as the ring card girl. And he is just like sweating his little heart out. Man, it's crazy. I love this book so much. Love that lemonade too. Let's continue. Chapter 1 of Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Let's go. And then she began to dance, a slow, sensuous movement, the smoke of 100 cigars clinging to her like the thinnest of veils. She seemed like a fair bird girl girdled in the veils, calling to me from the angry surface of some gray and threatening sea. I was transported. Then I became aware of the clarinet playing and the big shots yelling at us. Some threatened us if we looked and others if we did not. On my right, I saw one boy faint, and now a man grabbed a silver pitcher from a table and stepped close as he dashed ice water upon him and stood him up and forced two of us to support him as his head hung and moans issued from his thick, bluish lips. Another boy began to plead to go home. He was the largest of the group, wearing dark red fighting trunks much too small to conceal the erection which projected from him as though in answer to the insinuating, low-registered moaning of the clarinet. He tried to hide himself with his boxing gloves. This is crazy because this paragraph talks about how black men's sexuality is so vilified and criminalized in society that just the presence of a white woman naked, sensually dancing in their presence, in their premises, causes them to be in fear, which I think goes to show that, this book is talking about, we are invisible even to ourselves, right? We can't even see how distorted and twisted we become because of white supremacy. That, we're in fear of our own lives just for being men, just for being heterosexual. You know what I'm saying? If your heterosexual desire is aimed at the wrong person, that could be the end of your life. So, continuing here. And all the while the blonde continued dancing, smiling faintly at the big shots who watched her with fascination and faintly smiling at our fear. I noticed a certain merchant who followed her hungrily, his lips loose and drooling. He was a large man who wore diamond studs and a shirt front which swelled with the ample paunch underneath. And each time the blonde swayed her undulating hips, he ran his hand through the thin hair of his bald head, and with his arms upheld, his posture clumsy like that of an intoxicated panda, wound his belly in a slow and obscene grind. This creature was completely hypnotized. The music had quickened. As the dancer flung herself about with a detached expression on her face, the men began reaching out to touch her. I could see their beefy fingers sink into the soft flesh. Some of the others tried to stop them, and she began to move around the floor in graceful circles as they gave chase, slipping and sliding over the polished floor. It was mad. Chairs went crashing. Drinks were spilt, and they ran laughing and howling after her. Okay, this is an Epstein party. Don't let anybody ever tell you that black men are known for their sexual depravity and rapacious sexual desire. Because the white man's sexual desire is so sick, he will gang rape a white woman in front of the whole world with his buddies, and then go after that, have sex with his own child and then a dog. That is the sexual nature of the Caucasian. Let's keep it absolutely a buck. And the Epstein files prove this. And even back then, Ralph Ellison is writing about it. Back then, they're writing about it. Yes, this is the sexual nature of the Caucasoid. Let's keep it real. All right, continuing here. So chairs went crashing, drinks were spilt as they ran laughing and howling after the naked blonde woman. They caught her just as she reached the door, raised her from the floor, and tossed her as college boys are tossed at a hazing. And above her red, fixed, smiling lips, I saw the terror and disgust in her eyes, almost like my own terror and that which I saw in some of the other boys. As I watched, they tossed her twice, and her soft breast seemed to flatten against the air, and her legs flung wildly as she spun. Some of the more sober ones helped her to escape, and I started off the floor, heading for the anteroom with the rest of the boys. Some were still crying and in hysteria, but as we tried to leave, we were stopped and ordered to get into the ring. There was nothing to do but what we were told. All 10 of us climbed under the ropes and allowed ourselves to be blindfolded with broad bands of white cloth. One of the men seemed to feel a bit sympathetic and tried to cheer us up as we stood with our backs against the ropes. Some of us tried to grin. "See that boy over there?" one of the men said. "I want you to run across at the bell and give it to him right in the belly. If you don't get him, I'm going to get you. I don't like his looks." Each of us was told the same. The blindfolds were put on, yet even then I had been going over my speech. In my mind, each word was as bright as flame. I felt the cloth pressed into place and frowned so that it would be loosened when relaxed. But now I felt a sudden fit of blind terror. I was unused to darkness. It was as though I had suddenly found myself in a dark room filled with poisonous cottonmouths. I could hear the blurry voices yelling incessantly for the battle royale to begin. "Get going in there. Let me at that big Michael B. Jordan." We're not going to say the N-word anymore. We're just going to say Michael B. Jordan. "Let me at that big Michael B. Jordan." I strained to pick up the school superintendent's voice, as though to squeeze some security out of that slightly more familiar sound. "Let me at those black sons of bitches," someone yelled. "No, Jackson, no," another voice yelled. "Here, somebody help me hold Jack. I want to get that Get at that ginger-colored Michael B. Jordan. Tear him limb from limb, the first voice yelled. That's got to be terrifying. Number one, I know this is a work of fiction, but what the crazy thing is about our oppression as black folks, anything that you can't imagine that could happen to a people probably did. Because of over the course of, hundreds of years of us living under the thumb of white supremacists, they could have done anything to us. So is it impossible that, a bunch of rich white men got drunk one day, called a bunch of young teenage black boys together, blindfolded them, and forced them to box each other for their own entertainment? It's likely. It's not the wildest thing that we've ever heard that could have happened during slavery or Jim Crow. Not impossible. Continuing here. So, I stood against the ropes trembling, for in those days I was what they called ginger-colored, and he sounded as though he might crunch me between his teeth like a crisp ginger cookie. Quite a struggle was going on. Chairs were being kicked about, and I could hear voices grunting as with a terrific effort. I wanted to see more desperately than ever before, but the blindfold was as tight as a thick skin-puckering scab, and when I raised my gloved hands to push the layers of white aside, a voice yelled, "Oh, no, you don't, black bastard. Leave that alone. Ring the bell before Jackson kills him a Michael B. Jordan." Someone boomed in the sudden silence, and I heard the bell clang and the sound of the feet scuffling forward. A glove smacked against my head. I pivoted, striking out stiffly as someone went past, and I felt the jar ripple along the length of my arm to my shoulder. Then it seemed as though all 9 of the boys had turned upon me at once. Blows pounded me from all sides while I struck out as best as I could. So many blows landed on me that I wondered if I were not the only blindfolded fighter in the ring, or if the man called Jackson hadn't succeeded in getting me after all. Blindfolded, I could no longer control my emotions. I had no dignity. I stumbled about like a baby or a drunken man. The smoke had become thicker, and with each new blow it seemed to sear and further restrict my lungs. My saliva became like hot, bitter glue. A glove connected with my head, filling my mouth with warm blood. It was everywhere. I could not tell if the moisture I felt upon my body was sweat or blood. A blow landed hard against the nape of my neck. I felt myself going over, my head hitting the floor. Streaks of blue light filled the black world behind the blindfold. I lay prone, pretending that I was knocked out, but felt myself seized by hands and yanked to my feet. "Get going, black boy. Mix it up." My arms were like lead, my head smarting from blows. I managed to feel my way to the ropes and held on, trying to catch my breath. A glove landed in my midsection and I went over again, feeling as though the smoke had become a knife jabbed into my guts. Pushed this way and that by the legs milling around me, I finally pulled erect and discovered that I could see the black, sweat-washed forms weaving in the blue atmosphere like drunken dancers weaving to the rapid drum-like thuds of blows. So he's just swinging. He's just up there, just throwing hands. Everyone fought hysterically. It was complete anarchy. Everybody fought everybody else. No group fought together for long. 2, 3, 4 fought one, then turned to fight each other. Were themselves attacked. Blows landed below the belt and in the kidney, with the gloves open as well as closed. And with my eye partly open, now there was not so much terror. I moved carefully, avoiding blows, although not too many to attract attention, fighting from group to group. The boys groped about like blind, cautious crabs, crouching to protect their midsections, their heads pulled in short against their shoulders, their arms stretched nervously before them, with their fists testing the smoke-filled air like the knobbed feelers of hypersensitive snails. In one corner, I glimpsed a boy violently punching the air and heard him scream in pain as he smashed his hand against the ring post. For a second, I saw him bent over holding his hand, then going down as a blow caught his unprotected head. I played one group against the other, slipping in and throwing a punch, then stepping out of range while pushing the others into the melee to take the blows blindly aimed at me. The smoke was agonizing, and there were no rounds, no bells at 3-minute intervals to relieve our exhaustion. The room spun round me, a swirl of light, smoke, sweating bodies surrounded by tense white faces. I bled from both nose and mouth, the blood spattering upon my chest. So I take that paragraph to as interpreting. I interpret that paragraph to talk about how, black bodies are used for white entertainment. So a bunch of rich white men are standing around watching these young black boys beat themselves and hurt themselves and possibly even kill themselves for their entertainment. How is that any different than the NFL, the NBA, at one point the MLB, and maybe in the future the NHL? You get what I'm saying? How is this any different than any sport where black people are sort of forced to go into, because sports are true meritocracies where people cannot wantonly discriminate against you because of the color of your skin. You literally have to prove yourself to be the best, and that's why blacks are so overrepresented in professional sports, at least in America and in other parts of the Western world as well. But I digress. Let's continue here. The men kept yelling, "Slug him, black boy, knock his guts out. Uppercut him, kill that big boy." Taking a fake fall, I saw a boy going down heavily beside me, as though we were felled by a single blow. Saw a sneaker-clad foot shoot into his groin as the two who had knocked him down stumbled upon him. I rolled out of range, feeling a twinge of nausea. The harder we fought, the more threatening the men became, and yet I had begun to worry about my speech again. How would it go? Would they recognize my ability? What would they give me? I was fighting automatically when suddenly I noticed that one after another of the boys was leaving the ring. I was surprised, filled with panic, as though I had been left alone with an unknown danger. Then I understood. The boys had arranged it among themselves. It was the custom for the two men left in the ring to slug it out for the winner's prize. I discovered this too late. When the bell sounded, two men in tuxedos leaped into the ring and removed the blindfold. I found myself facing Tatlock, the biggest of the gang. I felt sick at my stomach. Hardly had the bell stopped ringing in my ears than it clanged again, and I saw him moving swiftly toward me. Thinking of nothing else to do, I hit him smash on the nose. He kept coming, bringing the rank, sharp violence of stale sweat. His face was a black blank of a face, only his eyes alive, with hate of me and aglow with a feverish terror for what had happened to us all. I became anxious. I take this a little bit like, as he said, this black man approached him and his face was blank. This guy is light-skinned. He said he's ginger-colored. You get what I'm saying? So he's a sort of lighter-skinned type of black person. And I'm not projecting that all light-skinned people are colorist or view with suspicion dark-skinned black people, but that's a wild characterization to make. You look this man dead in the eyes, and the main character says he just had a black-ass, blank-ass face. I don't know. Anyway, I wanted to deliver my speech, and he came at me as though he meant to beat it out of me. I smashed him again and again, taking his blows as they came. Then, on a sudden impulse, I struck him lightly, and as we clinched, I whispered, "Fake like I knocked you out, and you can have the prize." "I'll break your behind," he whispered hoarsely. "For them, from me, son of a bitch." They were yelling for us to break it up, and Tatlock spun me half around with a blow. And as a joggled camera sweeps in a reeling scene, I saw the howling red faces crouching tense beneath the cloud of blue-gray smoke. For a moment, the world wavered, unraveled, flowed. Then my head cleared and Tatlock bounced before me. That fluttering shadow before my eyes was his jabbing left hand. Then falling forward, his head against his damp shoulder, I whispered, "I'll make it $5 more. Go to hell." But his muscles relaxed a trifle beneath my pressure, and I breathed. "7. Give it to your ma," he said, ripping me beneath the heart. And while I still held him, I butted him and moved away. I felt myself bombarded with punches. I fought back with hopeless desperation. I wanted to deliver my speech more than anything else in the world. Felt that only these men could judge truly my ability, and now this stupid clown was ruining my chances. I began fighting carefully now, moving in to punch him and out again with my greater speed. A lucky blow to his chin, and I had him going too, until I heard a voice yell, "I got my money on the big boy." Hearing this, I almost dropped my guard. I was confused. Should I try to win against the voice out there? Would not this go against my speech? And was not this a moment for humility, for non-resistance? A blow to my head as I danced about sent my right eye popping like a jack-in-the-box and settled my dilemma. The room went red as I fell. It was a dream fall, my body languid and fastidious as to where to land, until the floor became impatient and smashed up to meet me. A moment later I came to. An hypnotic voice said, 5, emphatically, and I lay there, hazily watching a dark red spot of my own blood shaping itself into a butterfly, glistening and soaking into the soiled gray world of the canvas. When the voice drawled 10, I was lifted up and dragged to a chair. I sat dazed, my eye pained and swelled with each throb of my pounding heart, and wondered if now I would be allowed to speak. I was wringing wet, my mouth still bleeding. We were grouped along the wall now. The other boys ignored me as they congratulated Tatlock and speculated as to how they would be paid. One boy whimpered over his smashed hand. Looking up front, I saw attendants in white jackets, rolling the portable ring away and placing a small square rug in the vacant space surrounded by chairs. Perhaps, I thought, I will stand on the rug to deliver my speech. Then the MC called to us, "Come up here, boys, and get your money." We ran forward to where the men laughed and talked in their chairs, waiting. Everyone seemed friendly now. There it is on the rug, the man said. I saw the rug covered with coins of all dimensions and a few crumpled bills. But what excited me, scattered here and there, were the gold pieces. Boys, it's all yours, the man said. You get all you grab. That's right, Sambo, a blond man said, winking at me confidentially. I trembled with excitement. Forgetting my pain, I would get the gold and the bills, I thought. I would use both hands. I would throw my body against the boys nearest me to block them from the gold. Get down around the rug now, the man commanded, and don't anyone touch it until I give the signal. Now that's just dehumanizing. You make these boys fight and beat each other till they're all bloodied, and then you tell them, hey, go get all that money that's out on the carpet over there. Dehumanizing. Absolutely dehumanizing. But it also makes me think about the naked white woman that they brought in at the beginning of this story. And it makes me think that that was done to show the parallel of these boys' exploitation under the existence of white supremacy also affects white women, because this white woman was almost gang raped in front of everybody because of these wild, drunk white men. You get what I'm saying? So, that's how I look at that. But I'm going to continue here. This ought to be good, I heard. As told, we got around the square rug on our knees. Slowly, the man raised his freckled hand as we followed it upward with our eyes. I heard these Michael B. Jordans, because we're not saying the N-word anymore. We're saying Michael B. Jordan. I heard these Michael B. Jordans look like they're about to pray. Then ready, the man said, go. Okay? I lunged for a yellow coin lying on the blue design of the carpet, touching it and sending a surprised shriek to join those rising around me. I tried frantically to remove my hand, but could not let go. A hot, violent force tore through my body, shaking me like a wet rat. The rug was electrified. The hair bristled up on my head as I shook myself free. My muscles jumped, writhed. But I saw that this was not stopping the other boys, laughing in fear and embarrassment. Some were holding back and scooping up the coins, knocked off the painful contortions of the others. The men roared above us as we struggled. Okay, so shout out to Corvin87. Shout out to Corvin87 up in the live stream. Shout out to him. Shout out to Memorial Marble. We are reading Invisible Man, one of the greatest, most influential pieces of American literature ever, and one of the, I would argue, top 10 Black American books ever written. So we're rereading this. I'm rereading this because I have a class that I'm taking while studying here in Budapest, Hungary. I'm taking a class on race, gender, and post-colonial American literature. I'm studying for a presentation I have to do, but also sharing this great text with y'all as a part of the Book to React series, where we read an entire text from cover to cover on live stream with the people and react to it. Without further ado, let's continue here. Pick it up, goddammit, pick it up, someone called like a bass-voiced parrot. Go on, get it. I crawled rapidly around the floor, picking up the coins, trying to avoid the coppers and to get greenbacks and the gold, ignoring the shock by laughing. As I brushed the coins off quickly, I discovered that I could contain the electricity, a contradiction, but it works. Then the men began to push us onto the rug. Laughing embarrassedly, we struggled out of their hands and kept after the coins. We were all wet and slippery and hard to hold. Suddenly I saw a boy lifted into the air, glistening with sweat like a circus seal, and dropped, his wet back landing flush upon the charged rug. Heard him yell and saw him literally dance upon his back, elbows beating a frenzied tattoo upon the floor. His muscles twitching like the flesh of a horse, stung by many flies. His muscles twitching like the flesh of a horse, stung by many flies. When he finally rolled off, his face was gray, and no one stopped him when he ran from the floor and booming laughter. "Get the money," the MC called. "That's good, hard American cash." And we snatched and grabbed. I was careful not to come too close to the rug now when I felt the hot whiskey breath descend upon me like a cloud of foul air. I reached out and grabbed the leg of a chair. It was occupied, and I held on desperately. Let go, Michael B. Jordan. Let go. All right. So shout out to Memorial Marble, who says, "I'm not American, never heard of Invisible Man, but will put it on my reading list. What is your presentation about exactly?" Well, that's a good question. That is a very good question. What is it going to be about? I guess it's going to be about my interpretation of Invisible Man. What does it mean to be the Invisible Man? Because in this story, there's this guy who basically drops out of society and calls himself the Invisible Man. He doesn't gain any magical powers, but he goes through a series of weird adventures as only a black person could do, and then calls himself invisible. And I think my interpretation of it is that black people are invisible because we're not actually human in the minds of other people. If you are non-black, you think of black people firstly as the N-word. Then you think of us as whatever caricature you have in your mind of what Africa is, what blackness means, what music we've created sounds like, who our stars are, etc., 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 etc. So there is no such thing as actually being a black human in a white supremacist world. We are only invisible. We are only caricatures that are representations of other things to other people. That's my interpretation. But let's continue here. So the huge face wavered down to mine as he tried to push me free, but my body was slippery and he was too drunk. It was Mr. Colcord, who owned a chain of movie houses and entertainment palaces. Each time he grabbed me, I slipped out of his hands. It became a real struggle. I feared the rug more than I did the drunk, so I held on, surprising myself for a moment by trying to topple him upon the rug. It was such an enormous idea that I found myself actually carrying it out. I tried not to be obvious, yet when I grabbed his leg, trying to tumble him out of the chair, he raised up, roaring with laughter, and looking at me with soberness dead in the eye, kicked me viciously in the chest. The chair leg flew out of my hand, and I felt myself going and rolled. It was as though I had rolled through a bed of hot coals. It seemed a whole century would pass before I would roll free, a century in which I was seared through the deepest levels of my body to the fearful breath within me, and the breath seared and heated to the point of explosion. It'll all be over in a flash, I thought as I rolled clear. It'll all be over in a flash. But not yet. The men on the other side were waiting, red faces swollen as though from apoplexy, as they bent forward in their chairs. Sealing their fingers, coming toward me, I rolled away as a fumbled football rolls off the receiver's fingertips, back into the coals. That time, I luckily sent the rug sliding out of place and heard the coins ringing against the floor and the boys scuffling to pick them up and the MC calling, "All right, boys, that's all. Go get dressed and get your money." I was limp as a dish rag. My back felt as though it had been beaten with wires. When we had dressed, the MC came in and gave us each $5, except Tatlock, who got 10 for being last in the ring. Then he told us to leave. I was not to get a chance to deliver my speech, I thought. I was going into the dim alley in despair when I was stopped and told to go back. I returned to the ballroom where the men were pushing back their chairs and gathering in groups to talk. The MC knocked on a table for quiet. "Gentlemen," he said, "we almost forgot an important part of the program. A most serious part, gentlemen. The boy was brought here to deliver a speech which he made at his graduation yesterday." Bravo! Shout out to OG Kicks up in the live stream. We are reading Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, one of the greatest works of Black American fiction ever. Continuing. "I'm told that he is the smartest boy we've got out there in Greenwood. I'm told that he knows more big words than a pocket-sized dictionary." Much applause and laughter. "So now, gentlemen, I want you to give him your attention." There was still laughter as I faced them, my mouth dry, my eye throbbing. I began slowly, but evidently my throat was tense, because they began shouting louder, louder. "We of the younger generation extol the wisdom of that great leader and educator," I shouted, "who first spoke these flaming words of wisdom." A ship lost at sea for many days suddenly sighted a friendly vessel. From the mast of the unfortunate vessel was seen a signal. "Water, water, we die of thirst." The answer from the friendly vessel came back. "Cast down your bucket where you are." The captain of the distressed vessel, at last heeding the injunction, cast down his bucket, and it came up full of fresh sparkling water from the mouth of the Amazon River. And like him, I say, and in his words, to those of my race who depend upon bettering their condition in a foreign land, or who underestimate the importance of cultivating friendly relations with the southern white man, who is his next door neighbor, I would say, cast down your bucket where you are. Cast it down in making friends in every manly way of all the peoples of all races by whom we are surrounded. So if you don't know where that quote is from, that is from Booker T. Washington. Cast down your bucket where you are is saying, in a lot of ways, it's very deep, but it's basically saying, like, you should be satisfied with being a carpenter, working with your hands, basically being a menial worker. You shouldn't try to aspire for higher things. Try to be the best at being the most menial, basic black worker you can. Don't try to think that you can be a lawyer, a doctor, the president of the United States. As a black person, all you can be is the best farmhand. Milk them cows. Milk them fucking cows. That's all you can do. That's all you are good for. That's one way of putting it. Another way of putting it is that, don't try to fight for civil rights before you try to be friendly and nice to everybody around you. So it's a very ironic thing to read after you've been so thoroughly dehumanized by these white men around you who are now asking you to say these flowery, nice words, right? Anyway, continuing here. I spoke automatically and with such fervor that I did not realize that the men were still talking and laughing until my dry mouth, filling up with blood from the cuts, almost strangled me. I coughed, wanting to stop and go to one of the tall brass sand-filled spittoons to relieve myself. But a few of the men, especially the superintendent, were listening, and I was afraid. So I gulped it down, blood, saliva, and all, and continued. What powers of endurance I had during those days. What enthusiasm. What a belief in the rightness of things. I spoke even louder in spite of the pain. But still they talked, and still they laughed, as though deaf with cotton in dirty ears. So I spoke with greater emotional emphasis and swallowed blood until I was nauseated. The speech seemed 100 times as long as before, but I could not leave out a single word. All had to be said, each memorized, nuance considered, rendered. Nor was that all. Whenever I uttered a word of 3 or more syllables, a group of voices would yell for me to repeat it. I used the phrase social responsibility, and they yelled, "What's that word you say, boy?" Social responsibility. I said, "What? Social? Louder. Responsibility. More. Repeat. Stability." Ah! The room filled with the uproar of laughter until, no doubt, distracted by having to gulp down my blood, I made a mistake and yelled a phrase I had often seen denounced in newspaper editorials, heard debated in private. "Social? What?" they yelled. Equality, social equality. The laughter hung smoke-like in the sudden stillness. I opened my eyes puzzled. Sounds of displeasure filled the room. The MC rushed forward. They shouted hostile phrases at me, but I did not understand. Very funny. I mean, once again, this is very, very, very dark humor. This boy is a teenager who got beat up, bloodied, electrocuted in front of all these rich Jeffrey Epstein type characters. And he is now repeating a quote from Booker T. Washington. And when he accidentally switches the phrases from Booker T's idea of social responsibility to the ultimate truth of social equality between all people, now the white men are actually mad at him and they're throwing things at him, which is actually kind of funny. It's actually funny in a very dark, sadistic, twisted type of way. The same way it was very funny when Michael B. Jordan got called Michael B. Jordan by that guy with Tourette's. I will continue here. The laughter hung smoke-like in the sudden stillness. I opened my eyes, puzzled. Sounds of displeasure filled the room. The MC rushed forward. They shouted hostile phrases at me, but I did not understand. A small, dry, mustached man in the front row blared out, "Say that slowly, son." "What, sir?" "What you just said." "Social responsibility, sir," I said. "You weren't being smart, were you, boy?" he said, not unkindly. "No, sir." "You sure about that equality?" "What? You sure that equality was a mistake?" "Oh, yes, sir," I said. I was swallowing blood. "Well, you had better speak more slowly so we can understand. We all mean to do right by you, but you've got to know your place at all times." "All right now, go on with your speech." I was afraid. I wanted to leave, but I wanted also to speak, and I was afraid they snatched me down. "Thank you, sir," I said, beginning where I had left off and having them ignore me as before. Yet when I finished, there was a thunderous applause. I was surprised to see the superintendent come forth with a package wrapped in white tissue paper and gesturing for quiet, addressed the men. "Gentlemen, you see that I did not overpraise this boy. He makes a good speech, and someday he'll lead his people in the proper paths. And I don't have to tell you that that is important in these days and times. This is a good, smart boy. And so to encourage him in the right direction, in the name of the Board of Education, I wish to present him a prize in the form of this." He paused, removing the tissue paper and revealing a gleaming calfskin briefcase. "In the form of this first-class article from Shad Whitemore's shop. Boy," he said, addressing me, "take this prize and keep it well. Consider it a badge of office. Prize it, keep developing as you are, and someday it will be filled with important papers that will help shape the destiny of your people." I was so moved that I could hardly express my thanks. A rope of bloody saliva forming a shape like an undiscovered continent drooled over the leather, and I wiped it quickly away. I felt an importance that I had never dreamed. "Open it and see what's inside," I was told. My fingers a-tremble, I complied, smelling the fresh leather and finding an official-looking document inside. It was a scholarship to the State College for Negroes. My eyes filled with tears, and I ran awkwardly off the floor. I was overjoyed. I did not even mind when I discovered that the gold pieces I had scrambled for were brass pocket tokens advertising a certain make of automobile. When I reached home, everyone was excited. Next day, the neighbors came to congratulate me. I even felt safe from grandfather, whose deathbed curse usually spoiled my triumphs. I stood beneath his photograph with my briefcase in hand and smiled triumphantly into his stolid black peasant's face. It was a face that fascinated me. The eyes seemed to follow everywhere I went. That night, I dreamed I was in a circus with him and that he refused to laugh at the clowns no matter what they did. Then later, he told me to open my briefcase and read what was inside, and I did, finding an official envelope stamped with the state seal, and inside the envelope I found another and another endlessly, and I thought I would fall of weariness. "Them's years," he said. "Now open that one." And I did, and in it I found an engraved document containing a short message in letters of gold. "Read it," my grandfather said, out loud. "To whom it may concern," I intoned. "Keep this Michael B. Jordan boy running." Wow. Oh, God. Oh, that's horrific. Okay. So basically, the rich white folks, in celebration of his oratory skills and being able to parrot the words of Booker T. Washington, got this young black boy into some university for free. And the letter that he's supposed to give to the director of the university when he gets there says to keep this basically N-word running. Very, very sad. Very, very funny. It's hilarious, by the way, but I will continue. I awoke with the old man's laughter ringing in my ears. It was a dream I was to remember and dream again for many years after. But at that time, I had no insight into its meaning. First, I had to attend college. So I find that chapter very, very good, very vivid, very visual, very dark, very wicked, but also hilariously funny. I love this book so much. Hopefully you enjoyed it as well. We're going to read chapter 2 tomorrow of Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Hopefully you liked it. I got work to do. Catch y'all later, and peace.